Hey guys, today I am going to talk to you about what is good translation. We have previously studied what translation is, and today we are going to talk about what good translation is. Ideally, any translation should be good translation, right? That's a fact. But we need to consider that there are certain factors that influence the translation that we deliver to our clients. It depends on the client's needs, it depends on the purpose of the translation, and many other aspects that we already discussed. Now, in the most general sense, we'll say that translation is the decodification of, of the message in the original language. So you have this message in the original language, and what you are going to do is to decode it, okay? To take it apart, and then you are going to recodificate it in another language. In this case, our target language, which for us would be Spanish, right? It is again like taking an ice cube, turning it into water, and then turning it into ice once again. Alas, any translation will be losing some meaning in the process. It happens all the time. No translation can transmit exactly the same meaning, because remember that when we talk about meaning, there are many issues that are to be considered, and not only the words being used. We'll say that for a fact, translation is an intense mental activity. A good translation requires careful and focused work. Translation is not a mechanical process, something that, we can simply look at the words and just type the equivalent words in our native language. No, it's not like that. It's actually a very intense mental activity. It requires a lot of focus, a lot of concentration when doing a translation. It's important that you have a way with words. The richer your lexicon, your vocabulary is, the easier it's going to be for you to work through your translations, because you're gonna be able to access your word bank, your mental word bank, easily, and then you can spend more time processing the message. So yeah, it's very important that we have a rich vocabulary, because otherwise that's going to require that we make use of dictionaries, and obviously that's going to take time, right? A rich lexicon is very useful to try to achieve a balance between the beauty of the language and the faithfulness of the message. Yeah, the grammar police is back. It is very important to have an excellent understanding of the grammar, not only of Spanish but also English, because remember that both languages, even though they are grammatically similar in many cases, they also exhibit some differences. So that is going to be an issue that we need to consider, that your grammar must be working properly in both languages. You need to be able to make these grammatical conversions from one language to another, to understand when a grammatical structure, even though it might make sense for us in Spanish, if we try to do that in English, it will not make sense, and vice versa, right? To be succinct, a good translation, guys, is a continuous struggle between meaning and form. You're going to be trying to achieve this balance between what the message of a translation is, what the message is in itself, and the way in which you are going to put it. Because in many cases we understand what the message is, but it might be hard for us to get it across in the language that we are trying to translate to. Now, a good translation first must observe a balance between certain elements. You need to consider many different aspects when you are doing a translation. You need to consider the client's needs. You need to consider that sometimes the client doesn't know what he or she or what they want. Yes, you need to have a working knowledge of grammar. You need to understand the register being used. The register refers to the kind of language a person uses to express herself or himself. If the person is using a formal style, a semi-formal style, or an informal style in their writings. And you need to consider if you want to actually transmit that. If the client wants you to transmit the same style as the original text. The meaning, of course, that's one of the most important things when we are doing translation, that we are truthful to the meaning. There's no point in making a beautiful translation if the meaning is lost, right? We need to consider the tone, what the tone of the writer is, and we need to keep that tone as well. Obviously, culture is a big aspect. We need to remember that there are certain specific cultural aspects that do not translate well in the target language. There are certain elements that are culturally untranslatable. You need to consider that if you're going to make some adaptations to the translation, or you need to consider if you are going to keep this cultural aspect in there because either you want to transmit that idea, that cultural idea, or the client wants you to transmit that cultural idea. And of course, it's also very important to know what we are talking about. To know the subject matter is going to make our work much easier. And that is why it's important that when we translate, we don't try and translate everything that we are offered. What I mean to say is this. Every technical translation has a specific jargon, right? So it's very hard for us to manage the jargon appropriate to each area of study. So sometimes in medicine, a specific word will have a meaning, and in architecture, it will have a different meaning. In teaching, it will have a different meaning. So that brings a problem when we try to take every translation that comes to our hand and we don't know the subject matter. We might end up making a huge mess of whatever we are charged with, right? So we need to learn to say no. I don't translate, for example, say legal documents. No, sorry, I don't do legal translations. And who can help you with this legal translation is X person. I normally do chemistry and biology translations. So we kind of specialize even in translation, right? Of course, there are some people that translate many different sources, and well, kudos for them, but it's really important that we know the subject matter. Now let's talk about meaning. Yes, of course. A good translation must convey the meaning of the source language. There is no point in making a translation if the meaning that you are transmitting is not the same. You are slaying the translation if you do that. However, a translation that conveys the same meaning is not necessarily good. So it might convey the same meaning, but translation is not good. Because some translations, they read boring. You see, you read them and you say, no, this is not interesting. Or they employ language structures that resemble the original language and not the target language. And that is something we must avoid. And that is why it's important that we have good grammar in both languages, because the language structure affects greatly how someone understands the message. Regarding form, a good translation must be beautifully worded. Now, I'm not talking about being poetic in your translations, but what I'm saying is that, yeah, you need to have a way with words. You need to be a good writer. You need to have gotten your composition basis in English Composition 1 and English Composition 2. Your basis must be good in order to be able to write satisfactorily. The writing style that you use should be expressive, it should be fluent, it should be entertaining. To put it in other words, a translation shouldn't read as a translation. The point of a good translation is that you get to read it and then you think that it was written in your native language. See? When a translator can do that, then that translator, has done a very good job. But we have to be careful not to change the meaning, okay? Not to change the meaning of the original message by trying to write so beautifully, okay? So there's gotta be a balance between the meaning and the form. Both should go hand in hand. Now, I want to put into practice the principles of good translation, but I guess we are going to do this in the next video because my time is almost up. So, yeah, come back, please, come back to the next video so that we can discuss through an example the principles of good translation.